Did you know Windows 11 multi-session does not work with AVD Hybrid? And I don't mean it needs a tweak, I mean it's not supported. So if you're building AVD Hybrid because you want to run session hosts on your own hardware, maybe on Nutanix, Hyper-V, or another platform, and you're expecting the same Windows 11 multi-session experience that you get in Azure, you're going to hit a wall pretty quickly. But here's the interesting bit. It doesn't mean that a multi-user desktop's off the table. You just need to use a different operating system model. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do it properly using Windows Server 2025 with remote desktop services. We're going to deploy a Server 2025 session host. We're going to onboard it into AVD Hybrid. We're going to configure it for multi-user access. And then we're going to set up FSLogix profile containers so users get a consistent profile experience when they reconnect or move between user sessions. Because getting users logged in is one thing, giving them a proper desktop experience is part that actually matters. And I'll also show you the bit that catches people out the most. Because if you install Server 2025 and assume it behaves like Windows 11 multi-session, you'll miss some important configuration steps. So let's build it from scratch and I'll show you where the gotchas are. And if you're new to the channel, then welcome. This is the Virtual Mac YouTube channel. On this channel, I review the latest news on Azure Virtual Desktop, Nerdio, Intune, Windows 365, and much more. So if that's the type of content that you do, then please click that subscribe button because it really helps me grow the channel. So what we're going to go through on today's video, we're going to create an AVD session host. We're going to create a file server for the FSLogix profiles, and then we're going to log on and test it. Okay. And we're all going to do this using Hyper-V in my local environment, right? Maybe next week I'll do a video on how to find Nutanix using Nutanix files, but today's video, we're going to concentrate on Hyper-V. All right. So let's head over to the console. So this is my Hyper-V console running in my home environment. So we're going to go and create a new one, and then we'll also create a new host pool as well. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to create a new virtual machine. So I'm going to go to there, and I'm going to specify, obviously we're going to do this for AVD multi-session, we're going to call it. Okay. Now, obviously in a production environment, you probably create a template VM, but for this instance of the demo, we're just creating a machine. But if you're going to obviously create multiple hosts, then it's best to create a template. And maybe I'll cover that in another video later as well. And we need to create that as Gen 2. We're going to create it with 8 gigs of RAM, so 8096. Okay, and then we're going to configure networking, which is going to be my default switch. And I'm going to call this. And then we're going to install an operating system, right? So I pre-downloaded Windows Server 2025, so that's what we're going to use today. So I'm going to select that, so you can see here I'm using Windows Server 2025. Because obviously we can't use Windows 11 multi-session on AVD Hybrid on-prem, right? It's a licensing thing. We're going to open that, and click next, and then we're going to finish. Okay. All right. So that's creating the actual host itself. One thing we need to do is just to enable the VTPN chip. So I'm going to go to here and then just enable that there. Click OK. Click that, and then we're basically going to fire up that VM. So I'm going to connect to the console. Okay. So here's the console of the machine. We're going to make sure we are connected to that. Yep. Okay. And one thing as well, we just need to change the boot order on the actual VM. So it boots from the DVD drive at the top, which it is. Okay, so we're good there. And then we're basically just going to start that VM, right? And that's basically going to take us into the Server 25 operating system. Now, obviously, again, you can use whatever provisioning method you want, whether that's Nerdio, Nutanix, DevOps, or whatever. I'm just showing you the manual process that you can hear just to build some AVD session hosts as well. Okay, so I won't bore you with just if this is just going through the setup of a standard Windows Server 2025, at least on XNX, but I'll be back when we're up and running with this. Then we'll domain join it, okay? And then we'll basically create the file share, and then we'll register this host with the session host, the host pool, and then we'll log on to it. All right, so be back shortly. Just one thing to remember while I'm going through the setup, obviously you can see here we have the desktop experience. So you need to make sure you select the desktop experience. Obviously, don't just select the standard, select the desktop experience because the user is going to need a GUI. All right. So we're also going to need a file share, right? Because obviously we're going to need to create some FSLogix profiles. So what I've done, I've actually built another Windows Server instance, okay? And when I join the domain, so we need to set that up as an FSLogix file server, right? The AVD multi-session host is now finished building, okay? So what we'll do now is we'll log on to that. We'll domain join it, and then we'll also do the same for the file share as well. And then we'll set it up as an AVD multi-session host. and then we'll configure FSLogix, and then we'll log on and just make sure all this stuff works. All right, so let's go and do this now. All right, so as you can see, this is the AVD multi-session host. So the first thing that we're going to do is to join it to the domain. Okay, so to do that, we go into Server Manager, I configure this local server, I go to the work group, and then put the domain details in there. So I'm going to configure virtualmag.local. Okay, so I can put my username in there. Okay, and then that's going to join that to the domain. Okay, so just give that a second, then we'll reboot that. Yep, okay, close, restart now. Okay, so that's the AVD multi-session host joins the domain. So let's now do exactly the same thing for the file server as well. Okay, so I've got my file server here up and running. So just connect to console of that. You can see there, same scenario, it's not joined to the domain. So in fact, let's give this something different, right? So we're going to rename this, yeah. So let's change the name of it. So the computer name is going to be FSLogix. So now I'll call this file server. File server. Okay, click on OK. And then we have to restart that once that's done, and then once that's back, we will join it to the domain. Okay, so just log into that. All right, we get to local server, go to workgroup, go to change, domain, and then I'll change this to virtual mag and local. Up to these. Need to change the DNS servers, I think, for this. So let's just do some live troubleshooting here. Ping virtual mag. Yeah, so this session host is running on my Hyper-V host, but I have a domain controller running it elsewhere on the network. So what I'll do is I'll just go to here, go to the Ethernet, and then we're basically going to change the DNS server to point to the domain controller, which is 10.0.8. Okay, close that. There. Okay, go to workgroup. Okay, and then now, fingers crossed. There you go. Okay. Okay. All right, so that's now in the domain. Okay, so we'll restart that now. Cool. All right, so that's restarting. Okay, so now we've got the session host joined to the domain, and we've also got the file server joined to the domain. Okay, so what we'll probably need to do now is to create a GPO object to configure the FSLogix profile, right? So when we log on to the first time, obviously we'll just need to make sure that the users have got their profile set. But before we do that, let's actually go and set up the file server, right? So I'm going to log into here, and then what we'll do is we will configure a directory, and then we'll use that directory to hold the FSLogix profiles. Okay. Okay, so let's go into here, show this drive. Now, in a production environment, I'd recommend having a separate disk for this, yeah? So you'd have a 1 terabyte disk, or maybe you have network attached storage or something. But just the demo, we'll just be keeping this local. So I'm going to create a new share. I'm going to call that FSLogix. Okay, so what we do now is we basically create a file server role, right? So I'm going to go to add roles and features, click next, role-based features, click next. Now, you notice here, it says RDS. Don't do that, okay? Because essentially, when we run a script to install the AVD agent, that's going to configure everything for us, right? So I'm just going to go next, click server roles, right? So here, and we basically need to look for the file server role, right? So this is already selected actually. So storage services is already installed, but we need to select file and iSCSI services. So I'm just going to select file server, right? Don't think we need any of these. No, okay. Yeah, so we just need the file server, okay? So we're going to select next, and we don't need any of those. So click next, and then we're going to click install. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and set up a file server. The other thing worth mentioning is obviously non-performance, right? Now, this is a lab environment, but in a production environment, you'd probably use like clustered file services and file out share services, that kind of thing. But for this, obviously, I'm just using local disk, but within a production environment, whatever you're giving it, make sure it has enough IOPS, right? Because it still is data IOPS. For an FSLogix user is about 5. So log on, it could be about 50, right? So you need to make sure that whatever we're using has enough IOPS capacity. So that can be a set of SSDs, it can be a cluster that you've got running on-prem in your environment, it could be a sort of NetApp device, whatever you want. But whatever you're using, just make sure that you've got enough IOPS to meet the demand. Okay. All right, so that's installing. So we'll come back in a second. when that's finished. All right, so that's finished. So what we do now is go to configure the server and just show you what's happening. So if I go to file, I'll show it. So I've got shares. So there's no file share created, right? So let's go create a file share now. So I'm going to start the share wizard. We can use SMB quick. We don't need to do anything fancy here. So just going to click next. File server, so C. So share the located the file share with new folders. So type a custom path. So we're going to select the folder path that we just created, right? So just select that there, click next. We'll call that FSLogix share. Okay, and you can see that's going to be the file share name. Other settings, so enable access based enumeration. Yeah, okay, we'll leave that as default for now, but obviously in a production environment, we want to make sure that we've got all these settings correct. So whatever your design process would be. Okay, so next. So here's the permissions, right? I'm going to put the required permissions on the screen now. The recommended permissions that are for FSLogix, but creator owner, basically full control. So that means the person who's got access to that file share, or the person who creates that file share, basically gets full control, which is definitely what we want. We've got me as the admin, so that's fine. And then obviously the stuff that you want to remove from here as well. So definitely stuff like built-in users, you probably want to remove from there as well. Administrators, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, I'll put the permissions on the screen that they're recommended by Microsoft, but those are the ones that you put within here as well. Okay, I'm just going to leave these as default. Okay, all right. So click next, and I'm going to click on create. So that's going to go ahead, and that's going to go and create my file share for me. Okay, so we can see here we've got the amount of free space that we've got available to us, and this is how we've managed that kind of day to day as well. Okay, all right. So now we've done that, let's actually go ahead and just make sure we can access that file share, right? So I'll go on to my AVD session host. Just go to here. And then what we're going to do is connect to the AVD session host. What we're going to do, we're just going to make sure that we can hit that file share. Okay, so we're on our AVD session host. So now what I need to do is just make sure I can hit that file share, right? So what I'm going to do is maybe file, server, /FSLogix. Okay, so it's already found that path for me. And there you can go, we can hit that path, right? So what we'll do now is we'll actually go and create a group policy, which will actually inject those settings on that AVD session host, so that when the users log onto that session host, they'll get the correct FSLogix settings. So let's go and do that now. So I'm on the domain controller, and the first thing we actually need to do is to download the FSLogix group policy template files. So let's go ahead and do that now. So just go down here, prerequisites, so download FSLogix. So we'll download the latest version. So let's go to here. Okay. So what we want these two files here, right? Which are the ADML and the ADMX files. So if I just take those two files, copy and copy paste those onto there, just so I've got them. Okay. So they're there. So what we do now is we copy them into the correct file location, right? So you can see, just go back here. The article actually tells you which location to put them in, right? So we want the group policy management console because we want to use them with GPO. We're on the domain controller, and the first thing we need to do is to actually install the FSLogix files so we can see the actual configuration settings to configure the GPO, right? In the KB article, it gives you the actual locations, so it's in policy definitions, a folder that we need to put those in as well, right? So what we'll do is we've already downloaded and extracted these. So if you look in my attempt directory, you can see those here, right? So what we'll do is we will copy them. So we're going to take these two files. I'll just open up here. And then if we go to C, Windows, then we should be able to see the policy definitions folder in here. So I'm just going to copy these two in there. Yeah, okay. Okay. So the ADML file, I think that also goes. Cool. So they're the correct locations. So now, if we open up Group Policy Management Console, we should be able to configure a GPO setting. Okay. So we also need to create a separate OU that we're going to put the session host into. So we're going to do that now. So session host. So I'm going to create a sub OU under here. All right. I'm going to call it AVD Hybrid. AVD. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll create a new GPO containing just the FSLogix configuration settings for AVD Hybrid. I'm going to create GPO. I'm going to call it FSLogix. Call it Hybrid. Okay. All right, so we've got that GPO configured there. And the next thing we need to do is need to edit GPO. Okay. So if we go to Policies Preference, go to Administrator Templates, and then we can see there we have the FSLogix tab in there as well. Okay. So for what I'm going to configure in here is done. So if I go to Profile Containers, which is the one that I want, and there's only a minimum number of settings you need to configure in here as well. I'm going to turn this on because I always log my service. So delete local profile when VHD should apply. I'm going to click that to enabled. Yep, so we definitely want to enable this setting. So enable, yes. Okay. And then the next thing we need to configure is the path, right? Let's just go to here. So profile directory, SSDL. So the one that we want is VHD locations. There we go. So I'm going to click that to enabled. And then what we'll do is just to make sure we don't do a spelling error, and we'll just connect to that file path there. That's what file server / FSLogix, if I remember rightly. Just make sure we've got the right name. So ping file server. Okay. Okay. It said network communication thing, which you can't access that, but that's fine. Okay. So it's going to be file server / FSLogix. Okay. So file server. So that's the path that we're going to be using to connect to that, right? So you can see there the FQDN, and let's put that on there. So file server .virtual Mac. So we'll set that to apply. And then obviously best practice is just work through all these as well and see which ones that you want to configure. Okay, so they're just the default ones that are going to leave that within there. I've put that to dynamic actually. So yes, we want it to be dynamic. Okay, all right, cool. I think we got enough there. So what we do now is we'll go and actually move that multi-session host into that directory, into that OU, right? Just to make sure that we're going to have that apply. So what I'll do now is I'll just go and grab the host name for this. The host name. So it's that. So it ends in B8. Okay, so now if we go over to back to the domain controller, this one now. Okay, going to AD user computers, and then we'll go to computers, and then we'll have a look for B8. That was the one. So what we'll do then is we'll basically move that into that OU which we just created. Okay, we go to servers, FS session host, and then AVD Hybrid. So I'm just going to move that into that. Now, obviously, again, in normal environment, you'd automate all this stuff, right? I'm just doing all this stuff manually. Okay. Just to show you what this looks like. Cool. So we've got that. And so that now means that we've got that session history in there. And so next thing we'll go and do is we'll actually go and install the FSLogix agent on the actual session host itself. Okay. So that's done. So now what we need to do, we need to reboot the session host, and then we'll just check that the FSLogix rich settings are getting configured correctly. And then what we'll do is we'll actually log on to the session host. So what we'll then do is we'll actually join the session host to AVD, and then we'll log on and just make sure that everything is working as it should do. Okay, so I'm just going to restart that, continue. Okay, so that's a good sign. Please wait for FSLogix app services. So what we'll do now is we'll just check and see whether that's actually applied or not. So if everything worked correctly, we should actually have an FSLogix profile now on the VM. So let's have a quick look to see if one's been created on that file share. File, FSLogix. And there you go. So you can see here, we've actually now got the profile. Okay, so that's proved that the FSLogix installation has worked, and that GPO is kicked in, and it's redirecting my profile onto that share. Okay, so that basically just creates registry settings. So if you go onto the actual, so HKey local machine, software, FSLogix, and then you can see here where you've got the profile settings in there. So that's where it points to from within there as well. Cool. So now we've got that working. Now it's actually going to register this session host with Azure Virtual Desktop. So the first thing we need to do is to onboard the machine into Azure Arc, right? So we'll go ahead and do that now. So we'll head over to the Azure portal, we'll generate a script and we'll run that script on the VM. Okay, so this is the Azure Arc portal. So we want to onboard an existing machine. Okay, so let's go to onboard. I'm going to select the resource group where we want to onboard the VM into. So it's called AVD Hybrid. So that's the one that I'm using. Okay, so region. So we're going to onboard it into UK South. Operating system is going to be Windows. We don't need to connect it to SQL Server. And the connecting method is public endpoint, right? So the standard stuff. So we don't need to fill any of these in either. Authentication is used manually. Okay, so we'll log in there and then download and run scripts. So that's basically give us a script and which we can run on the VM itself as well. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that script, and then what we'll do is we will jump on the actual VM itself. Go to here and then just download that. Okay, so this should now run fine, and then we'll basically just run the script. So you can see this should go ahead. It's installing the Azure Arc agent onto the VM, and then we can then use this same script as well for any other machines that you want to onboard using Azure Arc as well. Okay, and once we've done that, we'll go back to the existing script, and then we'll just run that script as well, and then hopefully then the machine will pop up in the Azure Virtual Desktop console, and then we can log onto it. Okay, installation of the agent completed successfully. Okay, so it's asking me to authenticate. Okay, so put the password in there. I think it's complete. Okay, cool. So that's installed the Azure Arc agent. Okay, so what we'll now do is we'll go back and we'll just run the script again, and then hopefully we should see it complete. So just select that. Okay, so asking me to authenticate. So I'm just going to log into a browser. Okay, select which subscription I'm in, and then it should complete successfully. Okay, so that said it's completed successfully, right? So now, if we head over into the AVD console, we should see that machine pop up, and we'll also see the agent start to install as well on the VM. So if we now go into the RDS host pool, I should see that VM pop up. Not yet. Okay, take a bit of time. All right, we're back. So wait a few minutes because it did take quite a while, but a couple of things happened. So first of all, it installed the RDS role for you and rebooted, so you don't need to do that yourself. But most importantly, what you can see in the event log, it actually installed all the correct agents, right? So if you go over to the application event log, you basically see all these events from the RD bootloader, basically saying that it's installed successfully, okay? But most importantly, if we now head over into the Azure Virtual Desktop console, you can see here, it's now saying machines 2. And if I just click into here, we'll see that we can now see the session host here, right? So that's the session host that we were on previously. So what we'll do is we'll just log off from that session host. We'll launch the Windows app, and then we'll just make sure that we can connect to that session host as well. So and let me just log off from here, click sign out. And then what I'll do is I'll launch the Windows app. Okay. So now we should have a statement which says, yep, okay, available. Wait for that to come back. Okay, cool. So if I now log on to that account, so that's WD admin 1. Okay. All right. So this is launching us onto the Windows Server 2025 RDS operating system, right? So this is not Windows 11 multi-session, and this is Windows Server 2025. So just to prove that, and there you go. That's running Windows Server operating system. That's the only difference, right? Now, that's pretty much what you need to do end to end. So let's just quickly just recap what we've done here. So essentially, we've built a Server 2025 RDS machine on Hyper-V, right? We've installed the FSLogix agent. We've set up a file server and then pointed the FSLogix configuration at that file server, right? And then we've registered that session host with the host pool as well, and then connected to it. So this is all running locally off my Hyper-V infrastructure. So the important thing to remember is obviously you can now do multi-session, but you can do multi-session for Windows Server 2025. We've been doing that for many years. So you need to think about it a bit differently. So you definitely need to like optimizations on the servers to get as much density as possible, but also the license is a bit different as well. So at the moment, you have to buy what we call RDS CALs, but I think in the future, hopefully Microsoft will change that a bit. So yeah, you can obviously run multi-session on-prem using this solution. Of course, it's going to be more expensive than Windows 11 multi-session because you have to buy those RDS CALs, right? So let's see what Microsoft do when it goes GA. I know they are working on something, but yeah, the problem is obviously you need to buy those RDS CALs. So that's like an extra cost. But if you have a requirement to do on-prem AVD using multi-session and you're happy to pay those extra money for those RDS CALs, then fine, this is the solution that will work for you. All right, that's it from today's video. If you found it useful, please let me know in the comments. And please subscribe as well if you like this type of content. And I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.